You're listening to episode 101 of the D6 podcast.
I don't know anything more important in our society or in the kingdom of God than to help the church, help the family.
Discipleship is not an event, it's a way of life.
And one day it just hit me that discipleship at home was not about doing more. It was about inviting Christ into what we were already doing.
The goal of family ministry is not families sitting on the couch holding hands and singing Kumbaya. The ultimate goal is families that love God, love people, and make disciples of all peoples.
So that's why you're here. You're here to say 1 hour a week, as significant and as awesome as it is, we know that it's not enough and we want to be intentional with every hour.
You're listening to the D6 podcast. Here's your hosts, Ron Hunter and Jeremy Lee.
This is the family ministry podcast that helps you connect church and home. And we're back. We didn't even expect it to be this way. We thought we'd get to episode 100 and be done celebrating, but like a good party should, it just didn't stop. We've been partying all week. No, we've been celebrating episode 100, also 10 years of the D6 conference. Mm-hmm. If you haven't listened to that episode yet, go ahead and go back and check that out. This episode will make a lot more sense if you do that. But we have amazing guests. Ron, will you just run real quickly through who we have at the table?
Absolutely.
Then we can set up.
We've got Dr. Richard Ross. He's professor at Southwestern Seminary. He has launched a tremendous number of youth ministry leaders among our presence all over the world. He's written numerous books. We've got Dr. Brian Haynes, lead pastor in Houston at Bay Area Church, and he is also known for the Milestone Ministry and has written books in that area, been a family ministry. He's a lead pastor, strategist, and thinker. And then we've got Dr. John Trent, counselor extraordinaire, ministered to so many families, soldiers, ministry leaders throughout not only the world, because you travel doing that in many regards, but he's written numerous books, most often known for The Blessing. These are all chief architects and advisors for D6, and they have been since the very beginning, and we've invited them in for episode 100 and 101.
I was getting excited because you said he's traveled not only the world, but, and I was like, he's traveled to space? Yeah, that's amazing.
He ministered to, well, Brian might have that one. He has ministry to astronauts, so there's a greater likelihood. So
Houston,
yes.
Maybe one day.
All right, now we'll move from that discussion to a new discussion. But before we do, let's take a quick break. Here's a quick message about the D6 conference.
Are you looking for the right conference to attend this year? The D6 Conference is a family ministry conference designed for your entire ministry team. Come hear from over 30 speakers and network with churches that share your passion for reaching families. Family ministry isn't just another program. It's one of the most important things your church can do to make a difference in your city. At the D6 Conference, you'll be inspired and equipped to take your family ministry to the next level. To learn more about the D6 Conference, just go to d6conference.com.
So I want to keep drilling into the future of family ministry. I know that's interesting to our audience. It affects their lives as well. So let me put it this way. My sons play basketball, and there's always this kid on the court at their age that shot up and got really, really tall, but hasn't grown into their body yet, so they're super clumsy. And in a way, you can think about the family ministry movement, 10 years, maybe a little bit more. We're kind of in the puberty stage of family ministry movement, and there's a way in which it's grown really fast, and God's done a lot with it. But we might be growing into it a little bit over the next few years. And as we grow into the future, what are some mistakes that we might have made in this movement that we can just acknowledge and learn from and say, let's course correct as we move towards the future? And let's start with Dr. Ross.
I think one mistake would be to approach all of this as a fad, maybe to say, well, our thing this year is going to be the family or whatnot. To me, this is the church. It is the New Testament church, and actually the New Testament church was a lot like this for 1,800 years, actually. So it's obviously not a fad. I would challenge leaders to be thinking, how do we turn the ship of the church in the direction of the family, and how do we continue to live that out for a long time? Another, I think, problematic way to move into the future would be to see this as a marketing tool. The way we compete with the church down the street is, we're for the family. This is going to get our budget up, this is going to get our attendance up. To see it as a marketing tool would be to miss the whole point scripturally, obviously.
Well, I'm thinking about the church where people are, super busy. They're just, just like has been said several times, is this really a program? And here's what I'm trying to get at. One of the things that's really good to do, I think, is really building what's called a team of teams, not just a team, And I think a lot of us have kind of this team mentality. Boy, we really want to see each of our people succeed. But there's kind of a concept on top of that, which is a team of teams. And now we saw that last night, actually, with the D6 and Randall House. To brag on them just for a second, we got to, all three of us got to go to this really great dinner and hear about all the neat things that have been going on, but really see 8 different divisions of one company, all of them really together in a way that it was really a team of teams. And so that's one of the things that I am excited about family ministry having the potential to do. You know how administration goes across everybody does that. Everybody has budget, right? Well, family literally can be one of those things that just has been said, can really pull us together in a way that that it's not just your team, but we're really one team. That to me is going to be exciting to see.
Yeah, I think on the practitioner level and the grassroots in the church, I think calling it family ministry is a mistake. I think for an individual church, it automatically pigeonholes people to think family ministry. So the practitioners in the individual church need to think about family and the construct of discipleship. It needs to be a primary key vehicle all along the way. But if you call it family ministry, it automatically shifts and isolates. So you're still equipping parents to be the primary faith trainer, still making disciples of adults who will invest in kids and all those kinds of things. But to call it family ministry, for some reason on the local church level, isolates, and you get 20% instead of 80%. I think that's a mistake. I also think if we don't, at the local church level, create reactive strategies for discipleship when it comes to family, we're making a big mistake. We're missing a big opportunity. A lot of times we think about proactive strategies, like milestones is a proactive strategy. But if you don't have reactive opportunities while people are breaking along the way, or a kid goes bonkers or whatever, it doesn't matter if you're a big church or a little church, we can train lay people to help with the reactive part. And I think it's a mistake to leave that out, to make it all proactive and miss the reactive side of it.
That's great.
Yeah. When we think about these categories of people, whether it's parents or grandparents, even if they don't have kids in the church, and we're counseling them on being intentional, and they look at you and they go, man, I am so busy. I can't imagine thinking of adding one more activity in my schedule. And you want me to do what? Whether it's at church or at home, how would you advise them to look for D6 moments in their very busy schedules? Dr. Ross, will you begin with that one?
When my son was in middle school, he was in public school, and we got a notice that the PTA was going to have a program, and it was going to be showing parents how to parent better. Of course, secular, but we just decided, why not go? That was an interesting subject to us. So we went up, sat in the cafetorium. What we quickly discovered at beginning time is the only people in the cafetorium were the little board of the PTA and my wife and me. That was it. And this poor presenter had to speak to 2 people, in essence, to make a presentation. A month or two later, another notice came out. I think this was from the school rather than the PTA, but same building, same room. They said, we are going to give you insights into how to get big scholarships. What should you start doing now? What does your child need to be in? We're going to show you the hidden secrets of getting the great scholarships. We drove, we were going to get there maybe 5 or 10 minutes early. We had to park 2 blocks away and walk because there was no parking. When we got inside the cafeteria, it was already standing room only. Same group of parents, same room, immensely different priorities. Are those people busy? They would all tell you they're busy. They absolutely found time to do what they perceived was important to them. I think when parents say, gosh, I'm really busy, all this faith at home stuff, my goodness. The issue is really not how do you squeeze faith leadership at home into this otherwise busy schedule. The whole point is mom and dad's hearts. It is the transformation of their hearts, at least at some level of motivation for Jesus that would cause me to say, I'm choosing to do A instead of B. Otherwise, I do not see any way that people would take an otherwise busy schedule and just start doing some other stuff that they never really have come to believe is important to them and to their child.
Well, I think Dr. Ross is absolutely correct. The part of, I think, just being smart about how we offer that to people is using environments that they come to regularly already in the context of the church. So instead of adding another thing, use Sunday morning worship and their small group. That's where they're all coming. Use those things to forward the ball when it comes to D6 sort of applications. And then simplify busyness in the church. What do we need? What do we don't need? What do we not need? And make room. Now they can, again, back to the heart, they can fill up that room with anything that they want to, but we can encourage them. Then, for instance, if we take Sunday night programming away, we can encourage them to use it for a faith talk one time a week or whatever. I do know that while we've been doing that for a long time now, my best opportunity to take advantage of helping people actually lean into that is when they feel it, just like Dr. Ross's illustration. So at a new baby, they really feel like, I want the best for this kid. So they will show up, they will commit, all those kinds of stuff. At Purity for Life, when I'm trying to help my pre-adolescent that's becoming a teenager figure out how to navigate purity issues, they will show up for that. So then we're smart by capitalizing on their felt need in order to help them do the same.
We could call those milestones, couldn't we?
We could.
Yeah, that'd be a good book too.
Yeah, it would.
Yeah.
Awesome. Dr. Trent.
Well, on the other side, busyness is really a function so often of, kind of the issue behind the issue. Here's what I mean. I have a friend, Tony Wheeler. He's a Kansas State PhD, but he's a Quaker. I mean, he really gets spiritual formation, loves Jesus. So he's a counselor, but just great churchman and really good guy. But one of the things he says that I just love is he goes, we can miss a decade and never really see the people in our home. And here's why, okay, if you think about it as a construct, is there are some of us that we are busy facing a burden. Now, it could be an older, our parents are old and we're right in the middle of that. It could be that prodigal kid. It could be work. It could be something. And I'm telling you, you can wake up and you're busy, but you're not just busy, you're blind, and so another one is behaviors, where maybe we're hiding a certain behavior. Well, when you're hiding something, a behavior that God's not thrilled about, I'm telling you, it can flat everything that's really important. All your energy goes to kind of protecting that behavior and covering that thing up, and it just sucks away that energy. And then the third one's the past, and that was me a lot. I was so angry with my dad bailing out, and my mom became a rheumatoid arthritic, and how could a good God? And then he come to know Christ, but I still hated my dad. I didn't hate him, I just intensely disliked him. But you're looking at the past, after I became a Christian, but then you realize, man, I really need to forgive them. I really need to deal with some of this past thing. So burdens and behaviors in the past. So sometimes the busyness, really gets prioritized because, man, it's that heart issue, kind of like you guys are talking about, absolutely, that really keeps us from seeing it. And that's, we need to talk about those.
So I want to talk for a second about one of the criticisms that the family ministry movement has had to kind of come up against, and that is, there are those that would say that when we focus on families and when we care about that a whole lot, we're leaving behind the kids and the teenagers and the people that show up to our churches and aren't connected to any parent or family member who shares their faith. And so how can we as a church or as a movement, as a family ministry movement, address that concern? Is it a legit concern? And if it is, how can we address it?
I don't think it actually is a legit concern. I think it is a real concern that people voice. But when it comes to practice in the local church, I don't think it's a legitimate concern. You have in the whole congregation, you do have a percentage of people who will never participate in what you're calling family ministry, whose kids, we will have teenagers and children who come to our church whose parents never do, or whose parents never participate. That's, but before anybody was talking about family ministry, that was all the case. It is the case now. And in that case, the church really becomes the family, the primary. And, so for a teenager, his life group leader is really, or small group leader is really important because he becomes the blesser. He becomes the one who is giving counsel, who connects in relationship. So I think practically we have to train our people to know, who's in our small groups of children and teenagers, and how do we help them? I don't face criticism in the congregation. I can't think of a time anyone's walked up to me and said, "I hate that we're focusing on helping families and it's leaving me out." People might say, "How do I do this as a single parent?" Or "What is my role as a person not married, no kids?" in this deal. But nobody hates that we're helping family. Everybody gets that it's sort of broken. So I think practitioners who are well-meaning put a wall up to say, I don't know if we want to wade in there because we might leave some out. When in actuality, the church is going to be the church. You're just now pressing into a construct that is designed by God for discipleship. And so I think it's a wall we just need to lower. I get it though from the outset, but I'm just saying my practical experience is that it's not an issue.
As a student pastor in one church, for 12 years we did, I guess you'd say, a family retreat. It was not an issue. It was not a hardship on me to spend a month or two ahead of that saying to a believing family, "Hey, your daughter's really good friends with so-and-so who would never be a part of this retreat. Would you consider her staying in your cabin with your family?" It was just not an issue. And one of the things I loved on the retreats was I would go walking around the cabins and the RVs at breakfast time because people tended to say, "Come and eat some of our food." And if you did that multiple times, it was a wonderful breakfast. But the other thing I loved about that moment was you're seeing these kids bounce out of somebody's tent or RV, happy, smiling, eyes sparkling, and you knew for the past few hours they probably saw one of the best images of what a Christian family could be. Maybe they just didn't know that people could go to bed at night without hollering at each other, or maybe they've never heard a husband speak to his wife respectfully. So in addition to they weren't left out, there's this positive value of letting them actually see and envision what family could look like. I think our leaders in churches are very competent. I don't think it takes that much forethought and effort to say, we can give a creative twist, redesign, adaptation, so that all that we're doing for nuclear families is bringing people into those families for ministry.
Well, I have a question for you, Dr. Trent and Dr. Ross. You're both professors, you at Moody Seminary, you at Southwestern Seminary. A lot of seminaries and even some undergrad are retooling and including family ministry in the specific age-specific core subjects, like youth and family ministry or children's and family ministry. They're even requiring this for lead pastors, family ministry. Where do you see the educational or the academic aspects in our culture moving forward in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think the good news is academic institutions are beginning to address the issue. I do have a fear that in some cases that's coming from the marketing department or whatnot, where somebody is saying, hey, there's this new thing out there, and if we're going to attract students, we better be speaking about the family. The encouraging thing, though, is I think some institutions are moving because they philosophically, scripturally believe in it, and I'm very thankful to see that. In our case, I've created an entire course for student pastors related to the family. To think that a person can sit in class 2 or 3 times a week for an entire semester and all they're giving attention to every single day, every book they're reading relates to coming alongside the family to impact teenagers, that's encouraging. And by the way, in our lifetime, it's historic. Nobody's given that kind of attention in the past. So there is some movement. I think most schools feel like we're going to miss a train here if we're not part of the movement at some level. I think though some schools are slow to really understand and embrace the full philosophy and what that means.
Mm-hmm. Dallas, where I went, the THM was a 4-year master's program. So the first year you would meet with the dean of students, and the 4th year you would. And they asked me the same thing, both questions, both times when I was in the office. It was the only time I ever met with him, and he goes, well, you married? I go, no. I go, you dating? I go, no, I'm trying, but no. And then he goes, well, you got to get married, and what do you want to do? Where do you want to preach? Well, I don't want to preach. I want to be a family pastor. And there weren't really very many back then. And they go, well, you don't want to, that's not really what you want to do. There aren't that many. That's not really what you want to do. And that was my 4th year. That was the same exact questions he asked me. And but think how far that has come, today. There's counseling programs in the seminary. You don't have to just go get your degree somewhere else. You can do that. So they're integrating counseling. They're integrating family ministry. So I would agree with Dr. Ross. With Brian, there's the sense in which there's been a lot of movement. We ought to applaud that and say, thank you, Lord. Now, can there be more? I think in particular, what we're seeing is now I'm in Chicago. Anybody ever heard of Cabrini Green? Moody is right by what is now they've gutted it and it's changed a great deal. But Mayor Daley, think about that. Mayor Daley. The original Mayor Daley, there's a quote from him at the school where he said, when the Moody kids go home during the summer, the lights get dimmer in Chicago. And so one of the things that we're seeing very often is we have a clinic, for example, that's open to the community. We've got an opportunity, we've sent tons of Moody students into these places to be that salt and light. But seminaries have always been great about that. But now what they're doing is and even at the Chapman Center that we're getting ready to open up, is we're going to be having these family ministry students. We're going to be doing some really cool things with the parents, where we bring them and they're doing a craft with their kid, they're doing, bring them on campus. So I think there's much more of a willingness to kind of see that mindset of, man, we can impact the whole family, not just, again, the individual, but we can impact the whole family. So I think it's going to be exciting to see what happens on the whole educational side.
If I could just add an additional thought, earlier we were dreaming about the senior pastor and how he comes to embrace this whole movement. What if we caught those guys when they're 24 or 23 and we could infect their thinking, their philosophy, their sense of how we're going to do church? I think that is a massive vacuum right now. I think most schools, departments, majors that tend to draw senior pastors are simply not addressing that issue. And I think that is a rich place for change to take place.
Totally agree. Totally agree. I'm encouraged because in multiple denominations, seminaries and undergrad, we are seeing that trend. And I just wanted to see if you're feeling that inside the roles of academia. I want to go back to a question and slightly frame it differently, because I've been convicted of this, I know. When you go out and teach on family ministry, there's always going to be people sitting there going, I wished I'd have heard this 20 years ago. Because while we've been really emphasizing this now and we're celebrating 10 years, that means that parents of 10-year-olds have been able to coach maybe better their 10-year-olds all the way through age 20 now. But what if we'd have gotten to them at birth and they were starting and they're getting the first 10 years before they hit those teenage years? Inevitably, when I'm out speaking, and I know every one of you, when you're out speaking, there's somebody sitting there silently mourning going, I wished I'd heard this message 20 years ago, 30 years ago when we were starting our family. And they have kids that are grown, they are in a prodigal situation. So Dr. Trent, I'm going to ask you to put on your counseling hat. And this is a serious issue. Studies seem to reveal that upwards of 30% of the church have some prodigalness in their immediate family. Their grown kids are typically not serving Christ, and they wish they could go back and do it again. Put on your counselor hat, help them deal with, number one, the guilt, but give them the practical of moving forward. What can they still do even though their kids are grown and they're hearing this message?
How many times have you had somebody come up to you at the end of a sermon and say that very thing? I just didn't know, okay? And so what I always try to do when I hear that question, because you're going to hear it, is I can remember speaking at Promise Keepers. Remember Promise Keepers? There's almost 50,000 men. We're in New Orleans, and at this big conference, and I brought this kid up that had to sing. I talked on the blessing and sing, and he had cerebral palsy, and he's a singer. Sean Stewart, just great kid, and he had left his home because he had a kid with cerebral palsy, and he'd bailed out on his family, and the brother-in-law brought him to this thing. And here he is, he walks up to me, and it's like he's just weeping, and you get this, it's what you said earlier, really, Brian, there's those opportunities and moments. And I think that's an opportunity when they come up to us or they say, man, if I just didn't know. So I'll reach out and I'll grab their, eyes and just make them look me in the eye. And I said, well, guess what? Now you know. And so tell me one of your kids' names, and I'll just get one of them. So let me pray for him, the one that's off the rails, or the one that's hurting, and with this guy. And I think we just have to look for those divine opportunities. Number one, you're not going to get a ton of people to just say, well, go in for 12 sessions of counseling to deal with all these issues. But you just look for those divine opportunities to just stop right then and say, so guess what's coming up? Thanksgiving's right around the corner. So how about writing out a letter of blessing and reading it to each one of your kids? Well, they'll throw it away or they're not going to come. Well, mail it to them. Well, they send it back. Well, that's what my dad would do. I'd send him letters and he'd mail them back. I know people that, so you just say, you know what, just do your best. But now that you know, guess what? You get to love like Jesus even more. So that's one thought. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I get that all the time as well. And so I'll ask you guys, because I'm a little not as far along in the game.
Nice,
you were gonna say
nice
younger.
phrase. Nice phrase.
But I think now, having been a parent for almost 19 years, everybody has some level of regret.
Sure.
And so I try to identify with that when I hear people like I understand to a degree, But secondly, there's one thing that I think that a parent can do from that point forward that is intentional, and that is to find any way they possibly can to show unconditional love, no matter how the prodigal is treating them. I know it hurts, but I always encourage them. I think your example was good, but what can you do? Do they have a phone? Can you text them and just say, hey, I had a moment today with the Lord. I have some regrets. I love you, I mean, just little seeds, but don't stop praying. Don't stop offering unconditional love. Because God uses all those things that we forget the God factor in this thing. Yeah. We think, oh, I messed it all up, but He's a perfect Father, you know, and He's pursuing them and chasing them. They can run, but He's pursuing and chasing them. And so those little things that they begin to do, even if there's these years of hurt or separation over time, I think God uses those things, and it doesn't mean everything will work out hunky-dory. But as a parent, in the area that I have regrets, I want to know, at least I did my part, once I understand what that part is. And I think that's what they can do. And then they have to just trust the Lord. I have learned there's a lot of senior adults, like 65, 70, 80 years old, that will hear messages like this and be in tears. Yes. And just from a pastoral perspective, I have learned just hugging them. I mean, just like, I don't have to say anything. And there's something therapeutic in that. And it sounds, I don't know what it sounds like to you, but it's real. That just physical embrace and understanding and prayer is a big deal.
Pressing this a little further, Dr. Ross, I want to ask you on this topic, because you have a talk that you've delivered that has encouraged me on this very item, because while I've delivered these talks and I have people silently mourning, I have literally people weeping going, I wished I'd have heard, you don't know what my child's going through. I'm usually quick to raise my hand and say, there was an 18-month to 2-year period of time in my life where my wife and our daughter wasn't where she needed to be. And it was only through my wife's prophetic word going, don't just keep preaching to her when you're with her, capture her heart. You have a talk about capturing our child's heart, and I think that is so key in the midst of this conversation. Whether your child is a teenager or grown, every time they're around, the child is fearful. They're just going to be felt guilty. They're going to be strong-armed, that imposing, I'm not measuring up to your standards, Dad or Mom. But we forget how to communicate. Can you elaborate on capturing that child's heart for anybody who's hearing this? Because that really was an encouragement to my wife and I. And I think it's a key component, because unless we're speaking to them about just daily items, we'll never get to speak into them about significant items. Can you go further on capturing that child's heart and speaking into it versus other people?
I can't recover all the thought that went into this on the front end, but I know I was reading the last verse of the Old Testament, and about the same time I was studying some of the new research that talked about a relational connection with kids being the entree for spiritual life. But I ended up at a home improvement store asking a guy to cut off a piece of PVC pipe about this big around and about this long. Clayton was still a teenager at that time, so I put him in front of an audience. And I put one end of that white pipe against my heart. I brought Clayton up close, and we put the pipe against his heart. And I was able to make the point that for spiritual influence to travel, it has to move through something. There has to be a conduit, so to speak, that is carrying spiritual influence. And so I talked a little bit about the relationship Clayton and I shared, but I also gave illustrations about ways pipes can get pulled out of your chest. And I talked through very common things, even in Christian families. And I made the point then, I say, Mom, Dad, you lose the pipe in your heart. What you're left with, in our case, was a teenager who's got this thing stuck in his chest, but there's nothing on the other end. So it's still sucking, but it's sucking air. The kid's not getting anything that they need. So Mom and Dad, here are some practical ways to reattach that heart. Here's the way to get the heart back. Here comes the influence. And we did talk about lots of issues, and we still do all the time, but the key issue is unconditional love. For the very reasons you and Brian have just articulated beautifully. If they think, here comes another lecture, here comes another way for me to feel ashamed, but it's almost irresistible. When you're blessing a child, when you're saying words they've waited a long time to hear, when you're encouraging them, when you're hugging them, all these things, it just endears a person to you. It brings the pipe back. Doesn't mean you're not dealing with their behavior. You might have to drive this person to rehab and lock them up. It doesn't take anything away from that, but the attitude of the heart is unconditional love.
Thank you.
I want to take us back to a ministry strategy levels. Let's shift our brains just a little bit, because I have a curiosity. I'm kind of fascinated with the family ministry movement and all the things that are around it, or I wouldn't be at the table, I guess. But I have a youth ministry background, and when I came into youth ministry, it felt to me like youth ministry was around forever. I was shocked when I heard guys like y'all teach me that it really didn't have that long of a history as far as that way of doing ministry. And so in the process of that, as it began to grow, it has gotten more and more resourced, more and more niched. People have this part of youth ministry, this part of, you walk into an exhibit hall at a conference and there's 50 different people with 50 different ideas about how to do youth ministry, 50 different ways. And in this young family ministry movement, we are heading in that direction a lot of that ways. And we're practitioners of that. Every one of us sitting at this table, we have our own type of resource and our own nuance and how to approach it. As we start to resource family ministry and as we start to segment family ministry, grandparent ministry, single parent ministry, blended family ministry, all of these different, as everybody takes their piece and we specialize, let's stop for a second and ask ourselves, is this good? Is this good? Should we do more? Should we do less? What is your opinion? I think there's a lot of people listening who'd want to know how you guys feel about that.
Well, is this good? Anytime we can put tools in people's toolbox, I think it's good. If they need to know how, and these things in a biblical way, these different resources offer a way to do something, I think it's good. Where I think can be bad is if at any point the resources or the products become the purpose. I tell our team all the time, we talk about this all the time, is we are about purposes of God, people, and then programs, right? And the program can come and go. I only need it to accomplish purposes of God in the lives of people. So my caution with all that would not be, don't set up your booth or don't create your thing. God may give you some creative genius that's very spirit-led that will be a tool that people need, or a talk that people need, or whatever. But if we stay focused on the purposes of God, in my view, this is why the family ministry movement began. I saw, and I bet you guys would say the same thing, is that it seemed like people, the Holy Spirit was talking to a lot of different people all at once from all over the globe, really, and he just put it together and it began moving, because that was one of his purposes for our particular western side of the globe, was to reconnect with what the family is. It's the purposes of God thing. People make products. It's not necessarily bad. The tools are good. But if we lose sight of the purposes of God, that's when, and focus on this, when it becomes bad.
Good news, bad news, related to resources. We all know that for decades we've watched adults sit in, I'll just use the term Sunday school. We saw adults sit in something that looked like Sunday school and sit there for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and absolutely no growth, no transformation, absolutely at the same place that they were. Well, what was in their lap? Curriculum. And probably the curriculum was okay, but did change take place? No. I think the way God's Holy Spirit works most of the time, even though he's perfectly free to do whatever he chooses, I think what he chooses to do most of the time is interpret spiritual truth, rock solid spiritual truth, through a transformed person that's in a relationship with another person or even a group of people, and it's through that human agent in relationship with others that scripture is communicated, much like the pipe that we spoke of earlier. So in that regard, just to say we threw family ministry resources out there, all of a sudden it's just going to be wonderful, I question that. I think primarily it's going to be people awakened more to Jesus first, and then awakened to the mission of ministry through the home, and it will be through that person then that other people are going to catch the virus and move in that direction. But let me also speak to the good side. When you take milestones and you just go out there in the churches and you say, do people have in their minds the fact that there is unusual openness and motivation to speak to family issues at particular, that is a widespread sense of understanding. Now, they may be doing it classical milestones, Brian's way, they may have changed things up, but that concept has just spread everywhere. The concept of blessings is almost universal among God's people. They understand the power of that, they understand a little bit of the history of that, they're probably trying to do a little of that at home. So in that regard, here are two books that have changed thinking. So in that regard, the resources have an extremely important role, but I think once again, when those things are interpreted through people, that's when it really comes alive.
I love that.
Well, the only thing I will go back to is something the D6 and this podcast and the conferences are really good at, which is kind of the big K, little K kind of a deal, is when we did the Innovation Alliance, Brian, when there was the flooding going on in Houston, you know, before, if you needed help or your people did, you know, nobody was asking, oh, wait a minute, are you Baptist or are you Presbyterian? Right. You know, everybody saw the crisis, and there was a real kingdom sense of, hey, this is a huge problem. We're losing these kids. How do we do this? And you've been phenomenal, I think, the whole D6 movement has been, to say, do you love Jesus? And well, then, you know what? You know, come on in. Not that theology doesn't matter, not that God's word doesn't matter. Do you see what I mean? But it was really just the love of Christ and kind of that big kingdom thing. So that's my, you know, again, we were sponsored, the Innovations Alliance, by Family Life, which is Dennis Rainey's thing, and at the time, Jim Dobson, Focus on the Family. And you know, they didn't talk to each other a lot, but that was again one thing that even bridged those. So that's what I'm excited about. Is like, I think it's great. There's 50 booths. You know, in the standpoint, as long as it doesn't become the product. You know, but it's a way for us to really capture that kingdom, big K kingdom.
Well, we really intended, you know, as we wrap up this episode, we really had intended to try to capture one episode's worth of material, knowing we could cut out, but Jeremy and I have talked, and there's no way we could cut out anything, and so we're thankful that you've been able to share with us over 2 episodes some very rich content. And I want to personally thank you on behalf of D6 for all that you have invested in us, not only in the organization, but I want to tell you from the people who sit and listen, that our team members, that other speakers, they sit down and they hear you, and they walk away going, hey, I came to speak, or I came to work, and I'm walking away with my family being blessed. That's the difference each one of you are making. And I want to say thank you to literally thousands and thousands of people that have felt the ripple effect of your ministries and collectively our ministry with D6.
Well, like they say, turn out the lights. The party has to be over, guys. You've got to catch planes. You got to go home. And so thank you for being here. This celebration was amazing. This is the end of episode 101. And now we begin the next 100 episodes.
That's right.
And I'm so excited for that journey. Who knows what God has for us in that. But we'll figure it out starting next Tuesday. Hope you guys have a great week of ministry.
You've been listening to the D6 Podcast. You can learn more about D6 at d6family.com. And if you're a minister, we invite you to join the D6 Leader Network by going to d6leader.net.